Namaste and welcome. This video is an exploration on how to sit in a yoga practice. So a lot of times we are asked to go into a comfortable seated position, and that can be used for a brief meditation or a longer meditation, or simply at the beginning or the end of a yoga class. And I find that we haven't always looked at what a comfortable seated position means and how to achieve it. So this is a brief video to help you align your spine and come to a comfortable seat. And it offers a few different versions of a seated position and some discussion about the spine. So we are going to start today with a seated position on a chair, actually. So I want us to have a peek at the spine. So you can look at my spine from the side, and I'm just going to put my arms out. And our spine has natural curvatures. Everyone's spine has a slightly different amount of curvature. We have a curvature in our sacral region, in our lowest part of our low back. We have a curvature in our lumbar region, the low back. We have a curvature in our thoracic region, the mid to upper back. And then we also have a curvature of our neck, our cervical region. So really it's a wave shape of the spine, and the amount of angle of your wave will depend on your particular structural variation. Whenever we go into a comfortable position, typically that wave is appropriate for your body. So let's start with the chair. I'm going to move the chair to sit to the side. And a lot of us will do really well with meditation in a chair. So to meditate in a chair, or to sit comfortably in a chair, feet will be flat on the ground, and we will find our natural curvature. So a lot of times when we sit during the day, the curvature might be like this at a computer or such. Or sometimes we overcorrect and sit like this, and there's pressure on the back here. What we would like to find really is a comfortable seat where the tush is back a little bit, and we've got lumbar spine moving in, and we've got shoulders stacked over the hips and the pelvis, and the ears stacked over that. So this would be, for me, what would represent a comfortable seated position on a chair. So would you take a comfortable seated position on a lifted support like a chair? Draw the sit bones back a little bit. See if the feet can rest comfortably on the ground. And if the chair is a little high or the legs are a little shorter, you're going to put the feet onto support, maybe like a block. And make it so the spine has its natural curvature. And then we'll find this point. We'll take the hands to the thighs and just inhale, lift the chest, and exhale, tuck the chin into the chest, rock it back. We'll do 3 or 4 of these, in and out, between what we call cat-cow. And then find the middle ground where we're neither too lifted nor too much rocking back. Shoulders and hips and ears stacked, and then we'll pause here. And simply breathe. Let's breathe evenly to the front and the back body. Good, and then gently release. Let's release off of the chair and go ahead and place the chair off to the side. Now we'll come down to the mat for a seated practice. I suggest in this first practice taking a blanket and putting it under where the shins will go, like so. And then we'll sit in a kneeling position between the heels, okay? Now, first I'm going to demonstrate this from the front. We'll take the feet out to the sides, and then we'll sit down between the heels. For me and for many of us, sitting down like this creates a lot of strain on the knees. So what I'll suggest doing is take a block widthwise and place a yoga block underneath the glutes, okay? You could do any number of yoga blocks there, not just one necessarily. I'm going to turn to the side so you can see this. Knees fairly together, and then we can go ahead and take our fingers right into the backs of the knees and move the flesh of the calves out of the way a bit so we can sit between the heels. Notice we're between the heels and not on the heels here. And then again, take the flesh of the sits bones back a little bit, and we'll find a tall spine. Once we're arranged here, let's do a similar action as we did on the chair. So inhale, lift the chest, gaze up, rock the pubic bone down. Exhale, rock the tailbone forward and chin into chest. And just move in and out of this 3 or 4 times until we find a neutral spine right in the middle of those two actions. And you might even rock forward and back a little bit till you get to what feels like neutral for your body, for our body. And then we'll sit here. Close the eyes and simply breathe. Once we're in the comfortable seated position, if something changes and it becomes uncomfortable, then moving would be the best scenario, changing the posture. Breathe evenly from front to back. Notice how the body and mind feel in this position. Good. And then gently release. And for this, let's come on to hands and knees to release. And then we'll go ahead and straighten the right knee and press back through that right heel. Really completely coming into what's called extension of the knee. And then we'll go the other leg. Extension of the left knee. You might hold either of these for as long as feels comfortable. So what happens is in this position, which is called Virasana, the knees go into a full, what's called flexion or coming together. And then in order to unwind that, extension or moving the bones apart can be really nice. And if you have the ability in your practice, maybe even lifting all the way up into what's called downward facing dog here, completely straightening the backs of both knees and lifting the hips high. Now only do this one if it's comfortable and familiar right now. This is not a tutorial on the downward facing dog pose so much as it's a tutorial on seated poses. Okay, so that was our first seated pose, Virasana. And we did a seated on a chair pose, which I don't know if it has a yoga name, but seated pose. Let's do another pose, which is often called Sukhasana, which translates as easy pose. But really, this pose, easy pose, supposedly is not all that easy for most bodies. So let's get some support. What I'm going to use for support would be one blanket probably. So in yoga, it's nice to have props, and these props could be traditional yoga style props, or they could be cushions from the couch or anything. I'm actually going to use one blanket and one kind of cushion here to sit. And then I'm going to have nearby another blanket. Okay? And I'll show this one first seated to the side. So sometimes in school, in preschool especially, they'll call this one crisscross applesauce, hands in your lap. So we simply cross the legs, sit on a little lift, and we have the knees fairly together here and the shins forward. Maybe move the flesh of the sits bones out of the way. And either ankle can be crossed in front, but through the times that we practice, we want to occasionally switch which ankle's in front. Okay? So here, let's again start with the cat-cow action, undulating the spine. And you might hold the fronts of the knees. Do about 4 rounds here. Good, and then come to a neutral position for your spine. Pelvis is neither tilted forward a ton or rocking back, but right in the middle. And then rest the hands. Now here, depending on your body, the knees might be quite high, higher than mine, up here. And so I'm going to give us another option on this cross-legged position. And when I do that, I'll switch which knees in front just to kind of give us that variation. So go ahead and grab that blanket that we put off to the side and unroll the blanket 2 times so it becomes this shape or so. Then what we'll do is we'll roll that blanket on the long edge there. We'll take it and we'll take it in front of the shins and just tuck it in front of both shins underneath the knees. This might be enough support for many of us. Or alternatively, the yoga blocks can be used under the knees. Try it out. Try using some props here, whatever you happen to have. We'll again find the neutral spine with the props, and then let's sit and breathe. Notice how this particular posture feels. See if we can breathe into the front and the back body. Good, and then gently releasing the pose. Before we go from this particular pose, note how close the knees are towards one another here, just about shins distance apart. For our next variation, we'll change that. So set the blocks off to the side, go ahead and release the support of the blanket. I'm going to come off of my cushion a little bit, and for a moment just sit back and rock the pelvis. So you might just sit back here, lift the chest, and just rock the pelvis and the knees a little bit, side to side. Asking for a little love there into the hips and the knees, because we're asking a lot of them. Good. And then release. And we'll come to another version of the cross-legged position. This one also really called Sukhasana, also called easy pose. A lot of people will do this one first with the knees wider apart. And you see that the heels are kind of crossed right in the front here. Okay? So find a version like this and support your pelvis and your hips. So right now I'm on one blanket. Okay, I'm actually going to switch it out to something a little bit higher. I'll be on a cushion. And notice that I've still got a second blanket underneath the body. And a blanket like this underneath the body is for comfort, mostly of your shins and your ankles. So sometimes when we start to sit for longer meditations, we'll get some reversible conduction loss in our legs, which is really just when we say the legs fall asleep or a foot falls asleep. And that can happen if there's just pressure points along any area of the body. And so to make it a little bit more comfortable, a little softer, this blanket underneath can really allow us to sit in our meditative postures for longer. And I think many of us have that intention to be able to sit a little bit longer and more comfortably, especially if you're watching this video. You might want to sit for longer. Okay, so here we are, and then we'll again rock the spine. So I'd like us to go into, this is called extension of the spine, the chest lifts, and then flexion. The chest rolls in and the tailbone comes forward. Good, and just go back and forth. Do about 4 rounds in and out with our breath. Good, and then come into a little bit of extension, and then neutralize the spine. So have the pelvis be what would be feeling very neutral for your body, the spine lifted, and then relax the hands down. We can close the eyes and simply feel this version of a seat. Loosely translated, asana means to have a seat or posture. Breathe equally the front and back body. The front chest and the back of the lungs and ribs. Good. And then gently release. And then I'll invite us to come into whichever posture, whichever seat, whichever asana felt best to your body. So it could be this last one, or cross-legged with the shins a little closer and the knees closer. It could be Virasana, seated on the heel, between the heels, or it could be seated on the chair. Any of those postures are fair game and a wonderful choice. We'll come into a seat for a meditation practice together. Go ahead and get situated. I'm going to choose this particular one with the blanket, and that's just because it's useful for my body. It kind of makes my spine feel really supported. Good. And let's take a couple moments and just undulate the spine. Like now we've got this down. Maybe this time adding a little bit of a rock side to side. Find evenness across both sides of the sits bones. And then relax the arms. Close the eyes. And invite the breath to deepen. Intentionally finding a seat that supports our practice. Allowing the breath to breathe us. Utilizing the breath, the movement of the rib cage and the lungs, and also the subtle movement of the spine, or possibly not so subtle movement of the spine as we sit. As we invite the spine to stay tall, invite the shoulders and the thighs to be heavy. Rooted through the extremities and lifted through the spine. And then we'll deepen the breath. And we'll close this seated practice with one round of breath into sound of Om. Consider taking the hands to the heart. 2 hands together. Full inhale. Exhale completely. And inhale to Om. Thank you for exploring the seated practice with me. Namaste.